Hi guys, so something that really bothers me in the media, so be it movies or TV or even books, fantasy books and historical period books, is the concept that somehow to use a sword you have to be really tough, really strong, maybe quite burly, whereas to use a bow you can be really thin and possibly even a very small teenage girl or quite weak. Okay, this is something that bothers me greatly because since I was a teenager I've been using swords and bows, and I'm not particularly burly or strong, and I've known lots of people who use swords and bows of many different physical shapes and strengths and ability. Some of the best archers I know are big burly people, both men and women, and some of them are very thin and lithe. Equally, some of the people I know who are best with swords are quite small, some of them are quite skinny, others of them are quite big. Okay, so you can be either shape, size, strength, whatever, and use either weapon. However, I do want to point out that to use a bow of, shall we say, kind of war bow or, you know, kind of battle-worthy draw weight, you do need a certain amount of strength. You cannot be a weak and feeble person and use a bow that's of sufficient power to either have good range or to penetrate resistive clothing such as padded armour or even more, you know, like mail armour or leather armour, okay, or brigandine or things like that. If you're going to use a bow in war, it needs to be a heavier weight bow than you would use for hunting. The reason being that you will shoot heavier arrows, which will have, unlike a modern target bow which uses very, very light arrows, if you shoot arrows like that made of wood, because remember we're talking about historical period, if you shoot very narrow, light wooden arrows with a very light head on them, they do very little damage to the target when they arrive. Yes, they could bring down a deer, or at least wound a deer, and one thing I should point out at that juncture is that when you shoot a deer or most animals with an arrow, they don't drop down dead. The arrow usually either sticks in them or passes straight through them, and they then run usually for about 100 or 200 yards, and you have to track the blood and find them. So they run off for quite some distance after they've been shot. Arrows don't kill instantly, hardly ever, unless they happen to hit right in the heart, and even that doesn't necessarily kill instantly, or indeed in the brain. Okay, so generally arrow wounds don't drop either prey or a human instantly. But to shoot a heavier war arrow, which would have an armour penetrating head on it and have a thicker shaft, that's a heavier arrow, and therefore you need more poundage, more power behind the arrow to shoot it any kind of serious distance. And you need to be able to shoot such arrows at least 50-60 yards with some degree of accuracy, and therefore you're talking about bows really that are at least kind of 60-70 pounds draw weight, and this is, you know, most modern Olympic archers are only shooting 40, 45, 50 pound bows. You need to be shooting 60-70 pounds minimum for a war bow, shooting war arrows. And in fact lots of the bows that have been used in history by various cultures, be it in England with English longbows, or indeed in Korea or China or Mongol bows or such like, are very frequently above 100-120 pounds draw weight, and many examples have been shown to be about 140 pounds draw weight. Now this is a weight beyond which most modern target archers could even think about drawing without at least a couple of years building up to it. It's essentially weight training. Okay, so you cannot in these kind of movie contexts where you get someone who's really quite weak and feeble and doesn't look like they've done much sport or exercise or a kind of physical hard exercise in their life, can't just pick up a war bow and use it. You need to train with it for a long period of time, and that will change your body doing that. It will give you bigger back muscles, certain degree partly the arm muscles, although you're mostly using the back, and to a certain degree the shoulders as well. And it's also learning how to draw such a heavy bow. It's to do with stance and body mechanics, not just necessarily physical size. So to use a bow in war you need physical strength. A sword on the other hand, now I'll put the bow down, a sword on the other hand actually doesn't require a lot of strength to use. I run weekly classes and have done for more than 10 years in London in my class, and I have literally had hundreds, I've never counted, but possibly thousands now, but I've had hundreds of people come through my class over the years. Most people who try any sport or martial art usually only try it a few times, so lots of people come through and don't stick with it. Some people do stick with it, but I've had many people through my doors, and so far nobody that I've ever had, whatever physical condition they're in, male or female, old or young, tall or short, none of them have had any problem at all using a longsword with enough speed and force to be able to kill someone. Okay, a longsword, especially because you've got two hands on it and you're using essentially both arm muscles and shoulders and pectorals and back and everything else all into one weapon. Longswords are particularly easy to use, and even the weakest people pretty much can use a longsword effectively. One-handed swords, in my view, take a little bit more training because you're sustaining the whole weight of the weapon and moving it as nimbly as you can with only one arm. So they're actually more tiring using one-handed weapons. But generally speaking, you don't need to be greatly strong at all to use a sword effectively enough to defend yourself and remove an opponent from the picture. Okay, so in short, this stereotype in movies and TV that the weaker person, maybe the Keira Knightley or the Orlando Bloom in Lord of the Rings or in King Arthur, they're going to use a bow because they're maybe not as sort of big and robust as someone like sort of Aragorn is, or King Arthur, or something like this. Is a kind of weird idea, and I don't really know where it comes from. I think it's quite a modern thing as well, and it just doesn't make any sense. You have to be physically strong to be able to use a war bow, and ironically you don't have to be physically strong to use a sword. Okay, so something to talk about. Cheers.